I've been playing a lot of the new roguelike game Dead Cells lately, and it's got me thinking about a couple things. For one, diggity, this is a good game, and I sure love being the oily warrior of fiery death. And for another, Dead Cells doesn't really do anything crazy new or unique. In fact, almost every major aspect of Dead Cells has been done somewhere else before by somebody else. And before you all go soiling yourself in my comments section, Dead Cells is not a bad game because of this in the slightest. And let's explore something here. Perhaps this is a sign that the age of roguelikes as we know them is beginning to come to an end. I have to admit that aside from this game and Bumbo, which will come out, eventually, I can't think of any roguelikes that I've been excited for in the last couple of years. And these two have been mainly based on name recognition. I'm not sure I'd necessarily call the last 5 years a golden age of roguelikes, but whatever age this might be, I think it's coming to an end soon, or it already has. Roguelikes certainly aren't over, but I don't think they're going to be made how they used to be made. I guess what I'm trying to ask here is, have roguelikes ran out of new ideas to push the genre forward? I haven't really seen any brand new concepts or ideas in Dead Cells or any of the other roguelikes that I see constantly spammed at my inbox and keymailer, so does this have an effect on the genre? Does this even matter in the slightest that there's no new ideas? Let's talk about the gameplay elements of Dead Cells and where we've seen them before. So to start, randomly generated levels based on tile sets placed together in a way that's easy to manage without accidentally creating scenarios the player can never win. Well, done before everywhere. I'm gonna have to try a lot harder to push my point here. Defeating certain enemies or bosses or doing certain events as an incentive to get items that will make your run-throughs easier. Done before. Modifiers that enhance the playthrough and make your runs easier as you unlock them, such as increasing items in your item pool or better characters to start the run with. Again, done before. Randomly discovered bits of non-linear story. Done before. A lot. Branching level paths that are variants of the levels you'd normally play, however are either harder or done in a different manner. Done before. Daily runs. Absolutely done to death thanks to YouTube culture. 16-bit style pixel art or other retroistic stylings. I swear it's almost as much as a mandatory staple to the genre of roguelikes as randomly generated levels these days. We could keep going for a while, but the more of these I list, the farther we get away from what essentially is a roguelike. And as we can see here, Dead Cells is a by-the-numbers roguelike. Now again, in an effort to make sure you don't soil yourselves, as we just got all the furniture reupholstered here, remember, this does not mean bad. In fact, one of my favorite games was a game that had no original ideas in it. Do y'all remember the game State of Decay? Remember how there was nothing really new in it? It just took a bunch of good ideas existing in the genre, put them together, and focused on being as solid of a game as it could be? Because I did, and that was awesome. I played the crap out of State of Decay. Everybody bought the DLCs. Everybody got super sad when State of Decay 2 was mediocre. So not having any new ideas isn't necessarily a bad thing. Your game can still be awesome even though you aren't trying to reinvent the wheel. Dead Cells does do some things different that aren't necessarily new ideas, but they're certainly done in a new way. For instance, the way ammos and skills recharge so fast that it's a non-issue when it comes to grenades and how many times you shoot your bow or whatever you chose to use allows for much faster gameplay, especially when we compound that with the fact that there are multiple mutators that will cut down your cooldown times to crazy amounts where you can be throwing grenades inside of 5 seconds from your last throw. This allows you to think outside of the box for your builds and do things like the Mad Bomber build where you do nothing but grenades with weapons as an afterthought or just a stat stick, or alternatively have a bunch of traps like those double crossbow things that can just cut through an entire room full of enemies in a couple seconds if you do them right, which is a lot of fun, especially when you get bored of basic melee. Dead Cells also has a great take on the art of rerolling, which is that you can do it pretty much as you want, where other games, particularly The Binding of Isaac, make you wait for your rerolls, having to clear a bunch of rooms just to get one reroll or find pickups that aren't exactly common. If you got the money, you can reroll just about any weapon or shop item you want in Dead Cells. Like right after the third level, level, you'll get it from the very beginning, where you're allowed to basically re-roll your items until they have what you want, so long as you've got the cash, which is great because that offsets a bad start run. Say if you got some bad weapons, you can just tweak the stats until they all really go well together, and suddenly your bad run became a good run based on the money you had left over from the previous run. While some runs are certainly going to be a lot better than other runs in this game, this really helps make sure there aren't very many bad runs, or runs that are slow and tedious, unless you're especially intentionally trying to play cautiously. You know, those are two adjectives that don't go together. I'm sorry about that. Then there's how the game handles speed incentives and alternate levels. The speed incentives don't have any secret bosses, special enemies, or special levels behind them. Instead, you just get a bunch of prizes at the start of the next level, which ends up having the added benefit of if you're upgraded to a certain point where the first couple levels just aren't worth your time anymore, you blitz through them and you won't necessarily get everything you would have got for being thorough, but you're gonna shave a lot of playtime off your run. You'll get enough cells, power-ups, and money to get whatever you need for the levels that you actually want to spend time in. Say if you're looking for a certain enemy so that you can get a certain pickup item, and you can effectively get away with just running past all the enemies you don't want to be bothered with in the early levels in case you've already got highly upgraded things. Conversely, being thorough is its own reward in and of itself because you're going to get as many cells and other such things as possible, and you don't have to worry about losing out on certain bonuses or special rooms or bosses. As for the alternate areas, they're all unlocked by having one of the abilities you get, such as teleportation, wall jump, green thumb, I guess, and they're harder versions where you will eventually find more of those special abilities. You can get all the way to the Hand of King and then some without going to a single special level. There are a few things that Dead Cells does that are considered new or unique, but they aren't too crazy. They're more quality of life things. For instance, early on in the game, you can unlock a grenade that's guaranteed to appear on the first level. You just have to pay $7,500 for it, or gold, or whatever this currency is. And it's designed to allow you to throw it at an enemy that automatically turns it into an elite that is guaranteed to drop a schematic for an item. This is a great way to make sure you aren't just randomly trying to shoot the odds to see what you can get, but instead you can go out with purpose and hunt for items that you want to obtain during your runs. Once you get the hang of this weapon, you're going to get rid of a lot of the grind and a lot of trial and error. You also get a proper break in between each level to heal up, spend the cells you've collected, and reroll your weapons to get those upgrades. This is something I really wish would be seen more in other games, because I find a lot of roguelikes make you end up playing very cautiously because you took a beating on the previous level and now you're worried you'll end early. To be entirely fair though, having your damage carry over between level and level is a design choice that is completely valid. Games like FTL, Faster Than Light, and The Binding of Isaac choose to have your damage carry over for the whole run. That way you'll know that you need to learn how to dodge, or you need to make sure you pick your fights carefully because you are the fleet's last hope. Dead Cells' design choice is just to allow you, at least in the beginning of your runs, to have a healing station between every level, making sure that you never have to take on a boss when you're anything less than as ready as you can be. The other thing that Dead Cells does that I really haven't seen anywhere else is they stop the clock during certain things. Like, finally, thank you so much. I can look at the items in the shop. I can take in the lore without having to worry about if I'm burning seconds or not hitting an incentive. Between that and also the ability to where you don't need to hit the speed incentive if you want to get certain things, that is just the best quality of life ever. I hope this is a permanently added thing in roguelike games that choose to have speed incentives. Now that we've placed Dead Cells into the context of roguelikes, let's talk about roguelikes as a whole so we can put them in the context of games. Most people, me included, talk about roguelikes as they are a genre, but when you think about it, it's more like a modifier to other genres. Almost like the best comparison I can make is sort of like mockumentaries. They're not really their own genre, but people call them that because they're often the lens in which we see it. This is some crap. I'm just going to give you examples. For instance, you can have a horror mockumentary, like a thriller. You can have a comedic, satirical mockumentary. You could have a sci-fi, sort of political commentary mockumentary that gets bored of the concept in the final act and just becomes an action movie. Roguelikes are predominantly one of four genres: Metroidvania, Zelda-style dungeon crawler, turn-based strategy, and twitch shooter, kind of like Quake. There are outliers to this, and 4 genres is a pretty wide net to cast, but the majority of roguelikes are in one of those 4 games. It probably helps though that all these genres are very easy to make individual rooms for that allow you to randomly assemble those rooms into competent levels that leave surprises for every run. We sort of talked about this earlier in the last segment, but let's take a second to lay out what makes a roguelike. Well, we already got the randomly generated levels. If you die, you have to start all over. Playtimes are usually inside of an hour. There's usually a lot of bosses that vary based on what you've done. You get items added to a random pool of items that will spawn in these randomly generated levels, which you can increase the size of this pool by doing various tasks that unlock these items, such as the previously mentioned bosses and what have yous. Of course, there's more things we associate with roguelikes, but these are the core tenets. Just don't forget your artsy 16-bit styling. Now, these things weren't always the case though, and roguelikes were initially just a randomly generated level that had the enemies move every time you did, like the namesake game Rogue. What we saw though was after each game brought a new thing to the table, all the other games that called themselves roguelikes adopted it. This eventually snowballed into the roguelikes that we know today, as everyone wanted to keep up with the times and wanted to make sure that they were doing the same thing as the big games in the genre were. You blink and suddenly every roguelike has a dodge roll feature. Dead Cells is what brought us here, so let's talk about Dead Cells some more. This is one of the best feeling roguelikes I've ever played. I find myself getting into that flow where I'm not really aware of the buttons I'm pressing, but I'm certainly not mindlessly mashing them, if that makes sense. Everything is just so intuitive that the character is a natural extension of the controller, which is a natural extension of my mind. By the way, I played this on an Xbox 360 controller. I do not know about the quality of PC. I just think that this is the kind of game that needs a controller if you are to play it. Sidetracking aside though, holy crap, this game is intuitive and it just flows so naturally. Once you figure out the basics, you are going to have a great time with how the combat works. The prisoner is extremely agile and does exactly what you think he or she or it would do every time you press the control inputs. It's not too much, but never too little. The enemies in Dead Cells find that happy medium of being able to telegraph their attacks just to the right point to where you can tell what they're going to do even when you first encounter them, as well as not get boring because it's just too easy to see what's going on. Windows are tight, but easily manageable. On top of that, by the design of each enemy, you also get a pretty good idea of what they're going to do, so you're never going to be like, alright, I have no idea what this dude does, so I'm just going to hang back and wait a bit. Dead Cells is all about just going right into it. Thanks to the grouping and elite variants of enemies, you'll never really get bored of them, at least up until the 10 or so hours I've put in so far playing this game. And the only real thing I find that are kinda is the bosses, which there's only 4 of at the present moment, which I had to double check on the wiki just to make sure I wasn't just missing something. The bosses seem less about challenges towards the end of the level and more of a test to see if you can do a certain thing. Like, for instance, do you know how to dodge roll? Can you time your jumps correctly? Can you do all of that at once now? Once you've figured out the key trick into defeating each boss, it becomes alarmingly easy and more of a, okay, you're gonna have to put in another 5 minutes just to whittle this guy's health down. While there is a bit of play between how you kill the bosses, depending on what build you're running, it still boils down to, okay, I'm just gonna keep on dodge rolling concierge and stun locking him till it's over. Now, I know we've already talked about this in a couple sections, but where Dead Cells is really awesome is the general quality of life stuff, like the pausing the timer to go to the store or healing between each level is just something that I really wish more roguelikes would do, because it allows you to really enjoy the game and not have to worry about conserving your HP. You can just dive right into every fight knowing that so long as you survive the level, you'll be fine for the next level. I've honestly lost track of how many times I've played it overly cautious in, say, Rogue Legacy or The Binding of Isaac because I wanted to conserve my HP for a certain boss I was trying to come after, so I end up sneaking around all the rooms I can find. You tend to end up trying to take the shortest, safest, least amount of enemies filled path to the boss because you're worried about if you're going to be able to beat this guy or not, and you end up missing out on a lot of fun. I never had that issue in Dead Cells. I really enjoy the game's progression system too. There's something nice about being immediately able to get all the good quality of life stuff early on, which generally is what to do in roguelike games. It's not like that's a new ground, but it's also good to kind of see all your little achievements as you unlock them in the starting room, and also the ability to actively go out and hunt for those achievements, such as certain weapons through the boss grenade, so you don't end up mindlessly just brute forcing runs until you have all the things. Another great thing that Dead Cells does, at least in the launch version, is mod support right off the bat. Immediately as I installed it, there's Steam Workshop right there and people are already putting stuff in. That's a really good sign for a game, because that means even long after the developers have ran out of ideas, you're still going to have certain parts of the fan base tinkering away trying to find the next big thing for the game that they love so much. This is what happened with Torchlight 2 and Synergies mod, and maybe in a couple years time, Dead Cells will have its own equivalent of the Synergies mod, which really, total conversion mods, especially for games that you enjoy or have a lot of like items to tinker with, are just the best thing, and I really hope something like that happens. Earlier in this video, I kind of shied away from calling the last few years of roguelike games the golden age of roguelikes, and I think that's an apt observation. I think that the previous few years of roguelikes wasn't a golden age so much as it was a pioneering age, an age of expedition, and now with Dead Cells that doesn't really do anything new but does a lot of things really well, we can expect to see other games like Dead Cells that focus less on experimentation now that we figured out what makes a roguelike good and what to leave in, but more on refinement. This is less about the age of games like, I don't know, the original shareware version of Doom, Half-Life, Crisis. These were games that pioneered something in the genre, but looking back, that's just what they did. Like, you go back and play Half-Life, it's still a great game, but it's not as bonkers as it originally was, because the things that they first had in Half-Life are now staples of the genre. This is more of a time for games like the 2016 Doom or other amazing refined shooters that, while don't necessarily do anything radically different from previous shooters, they're just so well put together that it's amazing. And if anything, I'm hoping that the next half decade or so is going to be the golden age of roguelikes now that we've figured out what should go in them. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like what I do and want to see more, be sure to like the video, leave a comment about what I did wrong or did right, God forbid, and be sure to subscribe so you can see more of my videos in the near future. If you'd like to help me out and have me make more obscure videos or more videos like this, you can support me on Patreon, where every little bit of money helps me find those rare games that I want to cover, like something that's coming next month that I'm really excited to show you, and other such things, like maybe getting a better mic now that I've got a more permanent setup after the little boo-boo that happened in the Star Citizen video. Either way, I'll be glad to have you around no matter what you do or do not give. Thank you so much, enjoy the kitty videos, and I'll see y'all next time. Do you just feel the need to be in the basket? Oh, does the lunch? Oh, you don't want Scritches? You wanted Scritches earlier. Scritches? Scritches? Pets? Okay, fine.